G'day folks, and welcome to this report of the 1940 series of terms from this big campaign in Dai Senso. This has been a pretty good year for the Japanese. If you've watched the previous videos, you'll know a lot has changed in China. After the Communist Chinese launched their offensive in Hopei in late 1939, the Japanese shifted a lot of their forces from Kiangsu up to the north and launched this counterattack, which caught everyone by surprise. I think the Japanese were surprised at how successful that was. They just had a series of good rolls in good terrain and were kind of able to catch the communist Chinese out of position. They had advanced really up to Kwai Sui up here, and the Japanese pushed in through the south here towards Lengchao. They captured Langchao really easily, and basically the Communist Chinese have been reeling back towards their last remaining city in Kansu out in the far left. Having done that, they had kind of two choices. They could have continued to push against the last remnants of the Communist Chinese up here, but this is a good defensive stack now with about 4 or 5 strength points in defense in that city. Or alternatively, they could have shifted to the south. And what they've done now is they've kind of pushed in the back door of Sichuan. A lot of these Sichuan forces, you can see the yellow units here, were defending down the south in Kiangsu. Kiangsu still holds out. There are no Kiangsu units on the board, but they're being defended. Their last city is being defended by these combined Sichuan Yunnan forces around here. This is the border just here. And the Japanese have come in the back door from behind Sichuan. They've now captured Chongqing. With these two cities captured, they've pushed the rising sun marker up into the +1 victory point space, which is important for the Japanese. This I think frees up a lot of their political option cards down the track. More importantly, it's driving a wedge between Sichuan and Yunnan and Kiangsu. This is where the bulk of these Japanese forces are, in these 3 hexes. You can see their headquarters on top. Of course, they can only use 1 headquarters per attack, but they've got this big, powerful headquarters here, which is doing really well. And they've had the advantage of all this kind of clear terrain and good odds in a lot of this combat. What else has been happening? So this Japanese offensive is going really well, and it's continuing to roll. They're likely going to capture that last city in Sichuan on the next turn. This is the last outpost here, and I think they have the strength to do so. Throughout 1939, the last video I did, the nationalist and communist Chinese both benefited a lot from aid, from Western and Soviet aid to China, and they're rolling really, really well. Throughout 1940, they have hardly received any aid, and they've been really struggling. I've been using the Chinese production card to try and get these replacements coming out. But they're not able to keep up with the Japanese. The Japanese have also been focusing on their replacements, and they've been able to concentrate their forces more effectively. That's been the main story of 1940, this ability for the Japanese to concentrate their forces better than the Western and Soviet forces. And they've basically divided all those small pockets of Chinese and the nationalist and Soviet Chinese forces. This, of course, whilst this is happening, the other major powers are building up their forces. You can see in the background a lot of decent Soviet stacks. The Soviets are still, Russia is still at border disputes, so they're policy affected. They're not in the war yet. The Western powers, you can see kind of making their way through India, some of these Commonwealth forces. We also have the Australians in Leh, up here. The Americans are also in Wake Island. Detachments all over the place. So they've been building up whilst the Japanese have been attacking in China. We kind of expected this. The Japanese kind of knew this might have happened. They have been largely ignoring the Pacific, focusing on mainland China and so forth. So we kind of thought this might happen. Finally, European limited war has broken out. If I can just pan the camera up a little bit, you'll notice up in the top right that European war display. The Soviets were the focus of that European war. So there is still no Western European war. Basically what this represents is the Nazis heading east, focusing on the Soviets. So Britain is still under neutrality pact. The USA is still at peace, policy affected, quarantine. But the Soviets have their limited war marker out. This also changes a couple of things on the turn track. So we place quite a few markers out here. We have this marker comes out basically a year from when war broke out. This is when war broke out, limited war in Europe. We place this marker here, and we place the European total war display in the summer turn, basically 2 years on. You can see all those American and Commonwealth convoys. They're coming out through a lot of Allied rearmament cards. And if I just pan up a little bit, you'll see that rising sun marker. We're on +3 rising sun, +3 strategic value, which gives us that 1 victory point for the Japanese. So yeah, things, Japanese still feeling pretty good. Certainly optimistic for what the next 6 months at least will hold. Perhaps quietly optimistic. If you can see there, you can see all the Japanese forces available in their force pool. Not a lot of Russian forces. The Russians, basically when they get a force, they can place it on the board quite quickly. The Japanese have been adding a lot of forces to their force pool, but they are getting replacements out, but they're also exhausting them through their combat. They do get quite a few exchange results. Yeah, so doing well, but would love to get more of these on the board. So what else? Xinjiang is still under Soviet influence. Indochina is neutrality affected. Tibet has lost their neutrality. The other thing that happened is Hopei. You may notice the purple units are here. They become an Axis minor power. This is through the treaty event. In other circumstances, this might be really good. It would let me rebuild these Hopei forces as minor units. But as it is, the Japanese, as I just mentioned, are struggling to get their own units on the board. So maybe if I can get a lot of Japanese replacements over the coming year, then I can draw on those Hopei forces. But right now, there's no real need for those Hopei units. All right, well, as I said, that's the end of 1940. Just heading into the November-December 1940 turn, and then 1941. And I'll report back soon on what happens there.